Just a minute here. Yep, okay. Yes, thank you, Don. My name is Don O'Connor. I have a company called S&T Squared Consultants, and I am a modeler. So I'm the founding member of Modelers Anonymous. There must be a few modelers in the audience because we got a couple of chuckles. So we've got a great panel, I think, lined up. We have three other people to give their views on the subject of the future of low-carbon fuels. So to my left, Simon Mew directs the NRDC advocacy on the West Coast for clean fuels and vehicles, including the low-carbon fuel standards. Prior to joining the NRDC, Simon worked at the US EPA on clean transportation in DC, including RFS 1 and RFS 2 programs. I never met anybody who admitted to participating in those programs before. And in his spare time, he enjoys learning to scout with his son as assistant scout leader and coming up with a never-ending list of things to do at home. So thank you for joining us, Simon. To Simon's left is Jana Gastellum, who's Program Director of Climate with the Oregon Environmental Council. And so Jana leads state and regional work to build a low-carbon and equitable economy. Her recent portfolio includes advancing policies on clean fuels, expanding renewables and efficiency, and limiting and pricing climate pollution. She has over a decade of experience developing policy and building coalitions. Jana facilitates the Healthy Climate Partnership, a statewide network of representatives from business, public interest, labor, local government, and faith communities, all dedicated to climate action in Oregon. She previously worked for the United Nations Foundation, Energy Future Coalition, on U.S. and international opportunities to advance clean energy. And then finally, we have Keith Kerman, who's the Chief Fleet Officer, Deputy Commissioner, Department of Citywide Administrative Services for New York. And so he leads the largest and most high-profile municipal fleet program in the United States, works in coordination with major agencies, including the police, fire, sanitation, direct all aspects of fleet operation for the city, including repairs, acquisition, performance measurement, sustainability, fuel contracting, emergency safety, and risk management. And so New York City's fleet operations include over 26,000 vehicles, 37 main repair facilities, 87 expediter locations, 400 fuel sites, 1,600 staff, and $650 million in annual expenditures. And in 2014, he received the EPA Environmental Quality Award. So we have West Coast and East Coast represented, and I've put together a few slides to give you a bit of background information, and then we'll follow up those slides with some questions, which will get the views of each of the panel members. So yesterday, it was suggested that perhaps not everyone in the audience might have a good understanding of the low-carbon fuel program that California and Oregon does have. And basically, all fuel suppliers are required to determine their carbon intensity of their particular fuel. And if your carbon intensity is lower than the baseline fuels of gasoline and diesel fuel, the difference in the carbon intensity you can use to generate credits. And so in the case of biodiesel, if you have a good cooking oil biodiesel with a carbon intensity of somewhere around 20 grams per megajoule, at current prices, those credits are worth about $1 a gallon. If you have a soybean biodiesel, the carbon intensity of that in the California system is somewhere around 50 grams per megajoule, and so you get about 50 cents a gallon. So there's a requirement for all of the fossil fuel suppliers to lower the carbon intensity of their products over time. And one of the ways they do it is blending in biofuels. And the lower the carbon intensity, the more value that biofuel has, and generally speaking, a large portion of that flows back to the biofuel producer. So California has had their program. It started in 2010, so we've got 6 years worth of history with the program, and California is pretty good at publishing data, relatively timely, so data up until the middle of 2016 is available. And so this particular graph shows the percentage biodiesel and the percentage renewable diesel by quarter in California. So you can see that there's been really significant growth in California for both of those fuels. A little bit more renewable diesel than biodiesel being used in the market today. And the other part of that, the volume and the carbon intensity. So here is the carbon intensity of the biodiesel, again the blue line, and the renewable diesel, the red line, over time. So the fluctuation that we see here is mostly a function of different feedstocks going into the program. But you can see that over time, the biodiesel carbon intensity has switched to more lower carbon intensity fuels in California, and the renewable diesel, that flat line in the beginning was probably a modeling issue. Only one pathway might have been approved, and now that there's multiple pathways into California, we see more ups and downs in terms of what's coming in. There's more than one supplier. Each supplier has more than one approved pathway. So that's what's been happening in California. Oregon also has a low carbon fuel program, which has just really got going in 2016. And then on the west coast, going up to Canada, British Columbia also has a low carbon fuel program that's been going since 2010 as well. In the California market, we've seen the renewable diesel growth has been a little bit greater than biodiesel. And I was hoping to get some inputs from our audience members on what they thought was going to happen in the future with respect to that ratio of biodiesel and renewable diesel. What's going to happen with the blend rates? What do you think might happen with the carbon intensity of those fuels? So Simon, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Don. I was going to say, if you're part of the Modelers Anonymous, I'm part of the RFS Anonymous support group out here. I wanted to first thank Don Scott for the invitation and to the opening up to Natural Resources Defense Council to join this meeting. I just want to also thank NVB as well as the California Biodiesel Alliance for the years of support around clean fuel standards here on the West Coast. I think a lot of the producers out here have been very instrumental, from Lisa Mortensen to Ryan Lamberg, to Harry Simpson, Russ Teal, who are all really educating and out there working together with the environmental community around the carbon policies out here in California as a part of a broader coalition. Today is actually an auspicious day to be talking about the low carbon fuel standard, because to the day, exactly 10 years ago, a little-known Republican governor, known to some as the Terminator, we know him as Governor Schwarzenegger, signed an executive order beginning the low carbon fuel standard. That was 10 years ago. And it's taken about, through fits and starts, some time to get it working. And it is very much working. And I think that some of the data that Don has shared and showed very much shows the value that the program has been creating the past 5, 6 years in terms of changing the market dynamics in California. I think in terms of blending has gone up quite a bit. I think if you add together the different blends between biodiesel and renewable diesel, it was virtually below, close to 0% back in 2011, and now you're already above probably 10% in the last quarter there. Some examples, when the program first started, there was about 14 million gallons of renewable diesel and biodiesel in the market here in California. I think the last reported year period, there was 360 million gallons. So multiple orders of growth. Overall, as Don has said, this is an open system. It's based on performance. You get awarded based on your performance. Other fuel providers, alternative fuel providers, can come into the marketplace. And I think that's added to the robustness of the programs, frankly, out here on the West Coast, ensuring that not just support from the biodiesel and renewable diesel community, but also a host of other alternative fuel providers. And here in California, at least, they've been, for the most part, working together. We used to have an old joke, what do you get when you put a firing squad in a round room? You get an alternative fuels meeting. And I think that there's been a shift here out on the West Coast around different companies from different feedstock providers, all the way from biogas producers to technology providers who are looking to reduce carbon from even petroleum refineries, to ethanol producers, to major utilities, coming together to support the Clean Fuel Standard. And I think that's a core issue we'll get into a little bit about why we're seeing not just these blend rates, but alternative fuel use in California, one of the biggest fuel markets in the country and globally, go up by 43% over the last 5-6 years. I mean, tremendous growth.
So Jana, Oregon has come to this program a little later. So I think I've seen sort of 2 quarters of data for Oregon. The biodiesel blend rate in Oregon is even higher than California. It's a little over 5%, and there hasn't been any renewable diesel reported yet. Do you think we're going to see the same kinds of market play in Oregon with biodiesel and renewable diesel both having large roles to play?
Yeah. Well, I also want to add my appreciation for being here. Thank you for organizing this panel. Thanks to Don and Ryan as well for support. I'll give a little bit of context about Oregon. We are not the largest fuel market in the United States, but we are near one. And along the West Coast, we've had a real commitment to the use of renewable fuels. In Oregon, we've had a renewable fuel standard at the state level since 2007, which is a blending requirement. It's both E10, and now, because of in-state fuel production, we're at B5. And so the Clean Fuels program is in addition to that. We as a state don't produce or refine any petroleum products. We have to import it all, but we do have in-state biofuel producers, and that's been really important for establishing support for renewable fuels industry. Our program was authorized back in 2007, the Clean Fuels Standard, but it just got implemented starting in 2016. And we've been really excited and proud of that accomplishment, and it has certainly been, as Simon has alluded to. Is anyone getting a little, is this a little too busy? Okay. Is it okay? All right. That it really took a huge coalition effort and a lot of coming together of the clean fuel sector, the environmental community, and the public health community to really get this program established and off the ground. And what we've loved about it is that it really rewards continuous improvement and innovation. So if you have something in your process that lowers that carbon intensity of your fuel, you're rewarded through this program. And we think that's a great way to go because there is a lot of innovation out there. We were at a luncheon yesterday with students who are looking at the renewable fuel sector, and there's all sorts of ways to do process improvements and feedstock improvements, and we're really excited to see where the sector goes. I think that the Oregon market, it will be interesting. We're certainly benefiting from the learning and the market development that has happened in California. We have that in-state commitment to renewable fuels through our RFS. So I think we'll continue to see pretty strong support for biodiesel. I think we will see renewable diesel coming in as well. We have individual cities that have their own climate commitments, their climate action plans. They're going to want to be really pushing the envelope of renewable content that can go into fuels. And in Oregon, the transportation sector is really the largest share of our climate pollution. And so people are really looking for those transportation solutions. But we also have companies, we have Kettle Chips, and I think they really love the idea of taking their waste grease, turning it into fuel, and then powering their vehicles. So I think we'll see market segments that continue to stay very devoted to biodiesel, and then I think we'll see the renewable diesel coming in as well.
I'm curious as to whether or not we actually have any co-blending, either deliberate or accidental, going on, where the fuel that eventually goes into the vehicle actually has been blended with renewable diesel and with biodiesel. I know that there's been a program in Europe that's looked into the benefits of co-blending. Do you think, Simon, maybe you know a little bit more about the California market as to whether or not that kind of thing might be happening, but my sense is they're not necessarily competitors. They actually can work together.
Yeah, and if it hasn't happened already, it's probably likely to happen going forward, where you'll start seeing co-blends between renewable diesel and biodiesel. And that's, California, the Air Resource Board, which implements the program, has identified this as well as having beneficial properties related to the cetane, related to NOx, if you can blend the two. But I think based on your data, it'd be hard to imagine that there isn't a little bit going on. And my understanding is at least one company may be looking into that going forward.
It's not my data. It's CARB's numbers. Take no credit for it. Keith, I don't know if you want to weigh in on your view of California from 3,000 miles away, or...
Sure, it rains too much here. I'm going home where the weather's nice. You can see the sky. How do you people deal with it? I told my wife, I was going to San Diego, and I called her, and I said, all it does is rain. And she says, so where are you really?
And I say thank you. You're really making an Oregonian feel right at home. I think you've ordered up this weather just for me, so thank you very much.
So we'll switch to the heating oil market, so you're a little bit more comfortable. New York City markets, obviously, it's a lot different than the West Coast. The heating oil is a big part of it. So, it's a residential versus transportation, different quality concerns. So what's important to fuel providers and the customers on the heating oil market?
Okay, and even beyond the heating oil market. First of all, again, I think we all said, but thank you for inviting New York City, and on behalf of Mayor de Blasio, for having us here. This has been a fun conference and a very substantive conference. I go to a few conferences every year, and usually I kind of gloss over some of the panels and think that I know what's going on and don't really need to attend. But there's been really some great substance here, and I appreciate a lot. Just went from a great session on public opinion yesterday on the ASTM, which is very important to us. Maybe dry and technical, but the ASTM work that was done on heating oil paved a very specific and direct path to what we just did legislatively. So a few things about New York and things I just want to say to all of you. One is, while no one would associate New York City with the production of biodiesel, and it's associated with farmers and so many of you, we have tried hard to be your biggest customer. And I think if we aren't already your biggest customer, we are certainly on the path to do that. We've kind of come up in the program I'll talk about has really been a ground level, bottom-up program in a municipal environment, not driven per se by state policy. We started using biodiesel out in the New York City Parks Department, where I used to work in 2005. We had a donation of a B100, and we tried it on some garbage trucks in Staten Island for summer. From that donation to today, every single municipal vehicle, garbage truck, police, fire vehicle, every single public building and every single private building in New York City is using a biodiesel blend today. So you have become a product that didn't exist to something that now is universally part of how we function in the city at every level, facility, and transport. Just in the municipal side, we are closing in on using our 250 millionth gallon, our 250 million blended gallons of biodiesel. So you've proven your product. You've been operating through every possible situation. We've worked through local law legislation. So the fleet of New York City, which is the largest in the country, it's actually closing on 30,000 vehicles now, growing a little bit, is mandated to use. What?
Update your bio.
Yeah, no, I'm a professional civil servant, so what's the point? You know, as long as the pension's there for me, that's all. I'll give the pension board my resume on my way out. But every municipal vehicle is required to use B20 by law, or B5 in the winter. Every city building is required to use B5. City-owned building to use B5. We're testing B10, and we're going to try and make that jump. And as the councilman talked about yesterday, and his leadership was extraordinarily important in this, we have now set a path. Right now, B2 is in every private or public building in heating oil. At the end of this year, that'll be B5 in every private or public building. And we now have a legislative path to B20 in every private and public building in New York City. It's the largest heating oil market in the United States, and now you will be a huge institutional part of that. So that is a really big move. I will tell you that my wife and I own a home, and we started using B20 in our own home just this winter. So you know, you're breaking into the residential market as well. But as I said in a previous conference, if it gets cold in my house, I'm going to blame some of the people in this room. But let me just say a couple things about where we are, and then we certainly encourage you, and if I have any message, we encourage you to keep pushing forward. We work under a 50% goal for greenhouse gas reduction. We want biodiesel, and think biodiesel and renewable diesel could be a huge part of that. But you're not going to get us there if your ambition is solely B5, B10, and B20, which is a huge accomplishment. And we understand there's way more to go on B5, B10, and B20. And I think you should be pushing for a B5 standard and following the ethanol route. If ethanol is 10% of gas, why aren't you 5 or 10% of diesel? Seems pretty straightforward kind of argument. That said, if I need to get to 50%, 60% of the fuel use that I use is diesel on sanitation trucks and fire trucks and police emergency vehicles. So if I'm going to get to 50% greenhouse gas reduction and you're going to get me there, then I need to go further. We bid our first public contract for B50 this year, and we will start using B50 this summer. We are going to do a renewable diesel project this year, and I'll just say, talking about your question about co-blending, it is our desire to do something like an RD80 B20. We want that to be something people hear about. Why can't you combine them? And we're legislatively required to use biodiesel, so we're going to add renewable diesel and replace the regular ULSD. And so we're going to do exactly what you're talking about, and we're going to do it this year.
So you've talked about all volumes, and now you've suggested you need to reduce your GHG emissions by 50%. Are you looking at something like California, where all of the renewable fuels need to document their carbon intensity?
Well,
that's good for modelers.
So, it's interesting, right? So we're a municipality. I'm, fundamentally my day-to-day job, I'm a fleet operator. It's a large fleet, but it's still day-to-day public service. We got to pick up the garbage. We got to respond to emergencies, right? So when you get into kind of the carbon intensity modeling, the greenhouse gas modeling, a little bit, that's out of what my division will cover. But here's what I will tell you is we've followed what's happening with renewable diesel very closely in California, the San Francisco program, the program that spread. I think it's in Oregon as well and elsewhere. Certainly, we understand as direct operators of large fleets, the biodiesel cold weather issues, the biodiesel compatibility issues with the big truck manufacturers are real issues, the underground storage tank issues, and we've done a lot of interesting work on underground storage tanks. We want to build a renewable diesel market on the East Coast and in the harbor, and we have begun that process. We don't have the same state legislative structure yet to support it. So to some extent, from our view and what we can do is we're going to try and launch that within our scope. We're going to try and get renewable diesel out there and used this year. And I think we've talked about everybody in this market. So we're hoping to have our first demonstration project on renewable in calendar year 2017. But we're going to need help. Legislative help, market help, industry help, transport help. If we were to fulfill an ambition, say, for me, 5 years from now, we get out of fossil fuel entirely, and it's all renewable diesel or biodiesel or both, that's going to require a lot of industry work and a lot of work by all of you. That said, that is a pretty available route to us, right? If we want to achieve our goal, and we intend to achieve it, a 50% reduction, renewable diesel with biodiesel combined could get us there. So, build us a market.
I would just add that, my state is really committed to working with other states, and certainly NRDC has been a really great foundational organization as well. And so we love to have conversations with our East Coast states who are interested in these types of policies. And we certainly stand ready to share what we have learned through the political process and messaging and coalition building. And so if there are East Coast states out there, if you as the industry are hearing, boy, other states really want to get these types of policies established, we would love to partner with you in those endeavors. And we really appreciate the work that's done down at the local level as well. But, oftentimes these state-based programs can really help drive those market dynamics.
So I want to talk a little bit about all the different kinds of things that you can do, right? So you can do volume standards, you can do carbon intensity standards, and is it either or are they complementary kinds of things? What role does the RFS 2 play in California, Oregon, and New York? In Oregon and California, you've got a volume requirement that you have to meet your federal regulations, and then you've got state requirements layered on. Are they complementary programs? Can you do without a volume requirement if you have a CI standard? What's your view, Simon?
So my view is particularly for alternative fuels in the transportation sector, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. There's silver buckshot out there. These multiple policies can overcome different types of barriers for each type of fuel, honestly. Here in California, and probably true in Oregon, the LCFS credit works on top of the RFS RIN. So you can think about it, the RFS providing value maybe for the energy security, displacement, and then on top of that, you have this carbon market providing value for those carbon reductions. Two different values that are being monetized there. So I really do think that you need a set of complementary policies, both in terms of performance standards as well as incentives for production in place here in the States. So to that extent, California is looking at, here in California we also have a carbon market called Cap and Trade program. Transportation fuels are included in that. That creates additional value for biofuels relative to petroleum, gasoline, and petroleum diesel because of the embedded carbon in petroleum. It works out to be about another 13 cents adder in terms of a difference. But those permits, really, that value from that carbon market is now being reinvested in lower carbon transportation. There's been some discussions and advocacy around using some of those proceeds for low carbon fuels. Last year, a program was created to do that. So I think there is multiple policy levers here in California that can support a growing low carbon fuel market going forward, not just to 2020, but people are talking about 2030 here.
So I've heard that some people say, all we need is a cap and trade, and we don't need all these other complicated, costly programs. I have a hard time believing that 13 cents a gallon on transportation fuels makes a big difference to what people do. But how do you respond to that? That cap and trade is the answer. We don't need all this other complicated, time-consuming paperwork.
Yeah. Well, in these markets, when you're creating clean energy, there are many tools that you need, and sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a saw, but to build a house, you can't do it just with one tool. And I think that what we're building in California is a clean fuels market, a house of clean energy, and you're seeing that in California. I mean, just the past 4 or 5 years, California has grown to become one of the largest clean energy markets in terms of not just the market pool, but also in terms of jobs. There are now more jobs related to clean energy here in the state than the petroleum industry. And California is the third largest petroleum state in the country. So I think that is telling that you can have your policies help support the development of new and growing industries in a manner that is good for jobs, it's good for consumers, and it's good for the environment. And I think that triple win has been very important here in the state to having policymakers who, frankly, in a lot of those districts in California, it's a big state. 5 years ago, if you talk to some legislators, they did not know that there was a facility making renewable fuel they weren't aware of other clean transportation businesses. And I think the value of these sort of interactions is really about educating and making sure people are aware, particularly decision makers, and that, for every 10 meetings like a legislator might get from the oil industry, at least one of those could be from a clean fuels provider that might have an alternative perspective or might be able to respond to some of the information provided by the oil industry.
So, Jana, is Oregon looking at cap and trade to add to their suite of programs?
So I'll say, I think that these are all complementary programs. I mean, you guys are all out in the business space a lot more than I am, but getting investor confidence in space is really important. And so much of that is there a market there? Are there programs that support it? We really want to make sure that there is that policy stability so that there is investor confidence. And I think the more that we have programs that actually reward the good attributes of fuels and ways to differentiate these fuels and really what their benefits are, I think that really helps build the case for why we need to keep investing in the space and producing more. And we're really excited that if you look on your badge, you have sequential logo on there. That's the Oregon-based biodiesel producer. And they have been able to continue to expand their operations. And I think so much of it has to do with both the combination of the federal and the state level policies. So Oregon, we're a natural resource-based state in a lot of ways. We have a big timber industry. We have dryland wheat on the east side of the state. We have a big coast. And so we're a climate-sensitive state. And so it is really important that we continue to do our fair share in reducing emissions. And again, the transportation sector is the largest contributor to our greenhouse gas emission inventory. And so, we are looking at adding a cap and trade program to what we're doing. And a lot of that has to do with you need that ultimate kind of backstop. You need that long-term driver for where we really need to go to get to safe and stable levels. And we're really interested in what we can do with proceeds that can be reinvested back into the clean energy economy. And I think if we look at what's happened in the Northeast with reinvestment, if we look at what's happened in California, there are tremendous stories to tell. And so we would like to see that market acceleration through a cap and invest program.
So in Canada, we've had a public debate last little while about cost effectiveness of various greenhouse gas options. So, we had some professors that came out and said, $15 a ton for cap and trade, why do we need anything else? Biofuels are too expensive. How do you respond to that? Was that cost effectiveness topic in New York, Keith?
Yeah, well, I'll So I'll stay in my own lane bureaucratically and stay away from cap and trade and let others in New York talk about that. But I will say that the dollar per gallon credit has been extraordinarily helpful to us as a practical implementer. We get these checks, we give them to OMB, they like to get those checks. It's very visceral. We think that could impact, our very, very strong ambition to grow this program if that doesn't either get renewed or get replaced with something that's comparable, even though our fuel suppliers have promised to give us the money anyway because they just really love biodiesel. It's an inside joke just for one person in this room. But that incentivizing has helped. And I will say one thing about our program and why it could be even more important to have this kind of incentive going forward. We have grown the biodiesel initiative enormously in the last 5 years, especially, and the citywide initiatives have been the last 5 years. That's also been during a time of generally and dramatically lowering fuel prices. So for someone on my side and the policy side and the operator side who's been selling that, and I have been selling it personally, I can kind of say, look, we're already saving a lot of money on fuel. We're doing a lot of fuel efficiency projects and anti-idling projects and hybrid projects as well, fuel management projects. So we're saving a lot of money on fuel. Why not make part of that mix? It's also a greener and better and renewable fuel. So we've actually been able to do this whole growth program with biodiesel while saving a fortune. We saved $50 million in overall fuel costs, in the last year in the public report that will come out in the city's mayor's management report in just a couple weeks. So we've been able to grow the biodiesel component of our fueling while also saving money. Look, that can change, right? So fuel prices are beyond certainly a fleet manager's control. And so if that were to change and we lost that $1 credit, we lost that check, that could put a lot of pressure on what we're trying to do. On one hand, we've legislated, in the locals, so obviously we've institutionalized a lot of this, but we certainly have not institutionalized the growth opportunity. B50, B100, renewable diesel, those are the places we want to be, and it'll be tougher to go there if we lose this incentive and nothing really compelling replaces it. We're open to something compelling, but it's got to be real. The dollar, the check we get is real. And of course, if pricing starts to turn. So certainly, we're monitoring that. We're concerned about that. But right now, we're going to push forward as far and fast as we can.
On the issue of volume standards and RFS and their performance standards, I'd just like to bring people's attention to what's happened in Germany. So up to the end of 2014, Germany had a volume standard. They were also reporting GHG emission reductions, but because the program was mostly volume, they weren't doing a particularly good job of measuring their GHGs. They were relying on default values from bad models. And then in 2015, they switched to a GHG reduction number. And so two things happened is that one, instead of using a default value for the GHGs, all the fuel suppliers started to do their actual GHG performance. And so while they thought they had a 40 or 45% reduction in GHGs, they actually had a 70% reduction in GHGs. And as a result, the volumes went down. So Germany probably had an increase in GHG emissions in 2015 compared to 14 because they didn't layer the programs. They replaced one with the other. So, there's always some danger of believing that the next program is better than the last one. So biodiesel and renewable diesel contribution to the low carbon fuel standard in California, about a third of the credits being generated in California is due to biodiesel. So, that's a pretty impressive number. And looking ahead, Simon mentioned there was some problems with low carbon fuel standard in terms of implementation. So the top line, the black line, was supposed to be a nice smooth curve between 2010 and 2020, but it had to flatline while they were dealing with the challenges. But I guess the good news is that even as the program was not driving difference, the market actually was still giving a reduction in GHG. So that's the blue line, or the green line below that. But California is not changing their 10% target for 2020. So if they were a little slower in the beginning, they got to speed up towards the end. So that line has a pretty steep reduction going forward. And if you sort of take the green line and extrapolate it, between now and 2020, that green line is going to be above the black dotted line. So, you know, what's going to happen? I mean, how are the obligated parties going to make sure that they stay on board? So I think that, 2017, 2018 is going to be a lot more challenging for obligated parties. They got a couple of levers. They can reduce the CI of what they're blending. They can blend more. What are we going to see? Are they going to really try to get the lower CI numbers? Are they going to blend more higher volumes? Are we going to just see a decline in the credit bank? Where do we go between now and 2020? Simon?
So it's a good question. 4 or 5 years ago, I was a member on the LCFS advisory panel, together with imagine a room of 30 people sitting around a table, oil company representatives. We had Eric Bowen from even preceding REG, before he was at REG and had his own company. He was there. A number of alternative fuels, utilities, automakers, all sitting on this table talking about LCFS. And the key message from the Western States Petroleum Association was, we don't have fuel. In 2015, there's going to be a fuels cliff. We're going to go over this fuels cliff. No cellulosic ethanol. How are we going to meet these targets? And I think it was the structure, the design of the program, the flexibility to bring in to send that price signal, that market signal, to pull in innovation, as Jana said, innovative producers who were figuring out, hey, I'm operating a corn ethanol facility, and guess what? I can cut my carbon 20% if I upgrade efficiency, maybe have some mixed feedstocks. And I think that sort of power in sending the signal and letting innovation happen brought out what might have been dark horses in the low-carbon fuel race back in 2011. Tom Folks, renewable diesel, biodiesel, biogas, other types of fuels that could reduce their carbon intensity came in. And what we're seeing in California is actually an overcompliance. The oil industry outperforming the standard now. They can use those credits that they have generated, and this design is flexible enough to basically allow those credits, those additional reductions that they've already achieved, to be used going forward. And so it's really a market-based program. We're seeing as well even refineries talking about co-processing of renewable feedstocks, of doing things on their supply chain that you would never have thought of. I mean, solar thermal to produce enhanced oil, carbon capture from ethanol facilities. So I think we're going to not only meet the 10% standard, we're going to beat it. And beyond 2020, that's where California is at right now. California, over the next year, will begin the process to start thinking about what that trajectory looks like in 2020. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy to get to 2020. There's going to be a price signal, a strong price signal to providers to lower their carbon intensity, and that value will be translated to those who are innovating and bringing in lower carbon fuels. So I do think that there's a little bit of, the most important thing, I think, is market stability and certainty. And some of the prior lawsuits, a lot of the political uncertainty has started to be significantly reduced. And that's when you saw the market prices go back up, a large jump in uptake of fuels. So I think that the political certainty is very much part of this. And to the extent that there is a broad coalition support for the program overall, is very much ensuring that political stability, which translates to market stability. And what we don't want to have is a program that every year the standard changes and the standard, people don't know what to invest in because one day it's a 10% standard and the next day it's a 5% standard. So I think ARB can make adjustments along the way as needed, but I think California is all in on this one.
So what's the Oregon target for 2020, Jen?
Well, we're on a slightly different trajectory. We're going to hit 10% carbon intensity reductions by 2025. So our market, we are open for business past 2020. We'll also want to keep exploring what is beyond that as we get further into the program. We're also very optimistic about this program. I think some of the early modeling suggested that, if all of Oregon went to a B20 blend, you could really meet the diesel requirements for this program. Of course, we want to see those lower CI values come in as well, but we're here saying as well that we are a great market for products that are better for the environment, better for people, and good for domestic industry as well. And so we're at a point where I think, with the first 2 quarters of data, we have about a 26% kind of buffer in our program right now. We expect that to continue to grow. But we're really looking forward to where this goes and that we've got a program in place. But as has been alluded to, we need a coalition effort to keep these programs in place. We're constantly having to defend against potential rollbacks. We've already, beat back an entrenched industry 3 times in the legislature to get this program established and reauthorized. We got the oil industry to drop ballot measures to really kneecap the program. And we're also, fighting lawsuits as well. But we've won on all of those fronts. And we also have the court of public opinion. We Oregonians want cleaner fuels. This is where we're headed now and into the future. And so we're very excited about continuing this program.
So, advice for the industry, start with you, Keith. What does the industry need to be thinking about to ensure that, they capture all of this market potential, both in their own operations and how they interact with governments and in their dealings with the environmental community? What can the industry do to help you make sure that you meet your aspirational goals?
Okay, well,
Other than lower the price, we'll take that one off the table.
That would help. One thing that Simon said, so certainly in New York, we're trying to institutionalize demand, right? So that's the whole legislative effort, and the councilman talked about it a couple days ago, but that was not without its difficulty, right? The Manhattan Institute, the API, a lot of kind of players who had never talked about our biodiesel program before decided to engage that one in very publicly. So, things that I would just say, and this kind of goes back to the other question, which I just wanted to throw 2 cents. Certainly biodiesel, so we're working under a 50% greenhouse gas target in the city fleet, a 50% and 80% greenhouse gas target for all emissions for the city in general as part of the Mayor's 1NYC program. So we're working under these very, very ambitious greenhouse gas targets, as well as the important issues of air quality, the important issues of operations and renewable sources. Biodiesel renewable is not the only place that we are pursuing. At the same time as we're running a very aggressive biodiesel program and we're going to pilot and try and bring in renewable, we're running the largest electric vehicle program in the United States. We're looking into other types of technologies on hybrids and efficiencies. We're going to start running ambulances that plug in. We also are being pushed to look at other sources. There was a New York Times editorial, some of you might have saw just a few months ago, calling for the New York City fleet to go to all renewable natural gas and questioning why we weren't doing that and what's wrong with us. And so, one thing that I really want to say is, forget the political climate. You have a tremendous argument here. It's a bipartisan argument. If you don't know that, you should have gone to the session before. In my own career, I've worked for a Republican, an independent, and a Democrat, and I try and stay out of the politics of it, but we've been doing this work for 23 years, and it's all been progressing in a straight line. But really push your industry, find new feedstocks. There's great stuff that the kind of graduate students were talking about. Find new feedstocks, right? If there is a way to take the feedstocks that drive natural gas and renewable natural gas, whether it's from wastewater treatment plants or putrescible waste, my own little kind of fantasy world where all our garbage will become biodiesel, renewable diesel. We know that can be produced into natural gas, but of course the infrastructure requirements on natural gas are much more dramatic. For a guy like me who's getting, how are you going to work a big space for a plant and spend hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade all your repair facilities to maintain natural gas or hydrogen? So you have an advantage. If you can take those feedstocks and then manufacture it into biodiesel or renewable diesel that we can kind of then seamlessly put in trucks and heating and buildings, you have an enormous operational advantage if you can do it. But on the other hand, if you can't, or if you don't, or you say, B5's great, let's just stay there, then, we're going to be pushed at a policy level to say, all right, well, B5's great, but that's not getting you to 50%. So what's your next program? And once again, why aren't you doing renewable natural gas? Remind me about that. And why shouldn't every truck just be electric? So certainly what I would say to you, one, keep having conferences like this. Keep pushing your story. It's a great story. It's domestic fuel supply, manufactured by farmers in the middle states whose primary demand customers are these supposedly blue states out on the coast, people who had no association with what you produce, but we're the people trying to expand and grow your business to no end. But have a real ambition for it, and don't settle on where you are, and find new ways to kind of push it forward, and tell the story and help us tell the story.
Jana?
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting year in Oregon. Locally, we've had some real air quality scares recently with some glass manufacturing plant. And so I think the things that are really top of mind for Oregonians as we head into 2017 are, how can we as a state show leadership? How can we continue to stay committed to the things that we care about? It feels like there's a lot of uncertainty at the federal level. We want to be that stable place. And how do we support the things that, clean our air and clean our water? And so I think biodiesel has a really great story to tell. Lower particulate matter. You hear a lot about, kids on school buses and what they're exposed to with traditional fuels. So I would say, in the environmental and advocacy community are always looking for partnership opportunities to tell the good stories and to really support the good public policy that is needed. And again, we're really used to working in coalition. And so while there is a lot of attention and focus at the national level, I would say take a look at what states are doing and how you can play a role in the support that you can lend as well. There's always opportunities for editorials or videos that help explain exactly how these fuels work in different climate zones or whatever it may be. But again, I think states are really going to take strong leadership roles, and the West Coast is a really, really intriguing marketplace for you all.
So Simon, we're in California. We'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I'll just echo a lot of those comments, and I think to the question of partisanship, I think a lot of the legislators in the state, they're, whatever side of the debate they're on, it's a powerful message when a company located in their state comes up and says, we like this policy because, and guess what, we're also doing X, Y, I think just that basic knowledge, that reminder, because legislators obviously hear on a ton of issues here in California, and sometimes they're asked to make trade-offs, and I think it comes down to local politics a lot of times, but to that, and I think you all have a great story about the growth of your industry, and as well as the growth in California. And that's what legislators care about, regardless of where they fall on it. You know, if the current head of Celebrity Apprentice could have developed the low carbon fuel standard, you know, think of maybe what the last Celebrity Apprentice could be doing federally. So I think it's all up to folks to talk to them and talk to leadership. And California is a welcoming market, and to the extent you keep on doing what you've been doing already and engaging, I think that's going to be a value. And you know, I've appreciated, you know, NBB's approach in sort of under-promising and over-delivering. And I think over the years that has basically helped because we're going forward, right, with real standards that need real fuel to come into the market. And if you're able to do that, then it sets it up to basically for growth, for political support, for really creating that market certainty that becomes a virtuous circle, really, here. And what California does often becomes a model for other states like Oregon and other jurisdictions.
We're just about at the end of the time. We've probably got time for one question. Look, somebody's right up. He's speaking at the microphone.
Hi, Tom Folks. I work at a company called My Company in California. Simon does our work. We know Simon. Yesterday, the incoming head of US EPA indicated during his confirmation hearings that the waiver that the state of California has always enjoyed under the U.S. Clean Air Act to enact its own emissions regulations that are more steered than federal levels. Indicated that that waiver may not necessarily be an automatic, may not necessarily be given anymore. And it's under that waiver that you're able to regulate, that the state of California is able to regulate carbon emissions out of tailpipes and so forth. You've gotten sort of permission to do that via a waiver from the US EPA. I'm wondering, Simon in particular, given that you and colleagues and associates give a spot to, what might happen under a new regime where California is no longer allowed not only to set its own emissions standards, but also perhaps roll back some of the carbon regulations that have been promulgated in 32, now it's 32 and so forth. I mean, there's a lot of arcane policy behind all of this, as I'm sure you know. But it was rather, I would say, the entire industry was sort of taken aback. The diesel industry was taken aback, automotive, heavy duty. Everybody was taken aback by the statement that California may no longer have a special place. For the benefit of those who aren't familiar with why California is about to do that, its Air Resources Board and its emission regulations preceded the adoption of the U.S. Clean Air Act, preceded the creation of the U.S. EPA. Therefore, it has had historical grandfathering clause, enabling it to adopt certain regulations because of its own unique air quality characteristics. So, Simon, it's a long-winded question, but it's a big one, and I'm wondering if you all have given that much thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, NRDC was founded nearly 40 years ago, pursuing around law. And, you know, folks were back when, are still around that had worked on the Clean Air Act back from the 70s. And you're exactly right that California has always had the state right to set its own vehicle standards because they were doing that decades before even EPA was created under the Nixon administration. So I would say that, you know, I'll give the benefit of the doubt to maybe not quite understanding the requirements under law right now with the Clean Air Act and the waiver. We've never seen a waiver rescinded after it's been given. I think that would be pretty unprecedented, certainly legally challenged for many, many years to come. So we're not necessarily thinking that the whole fabric of 40-year history here will be changed overnight. We're certainly gearing up for a fight, and it will be a fight if they go down that route, if the administration chooses to go down that route. But again, I think, without reading into people's comments on a very actually complicated topic, I think that I'm hopeful that the different industries and the different support will eventually lead to EPA and the administration having a better understanding of the things that would be lost if they go down certain routes like that.
And I'd just add that Oregon has benefited from that as well, and I think that there would be other states that would help join in that defense and fight as well.
Yeah. And we've been there before.
So our time is up. The last word goes to Donnell.
Yeah, please join me in thanking Don and this wonderful panel. Thank you all. Yes, so here we are. We're at the finishing stages, and really certainly appreciate every one of you being here. The National Biodiesel Board takes a great deal of pride in putting this event together on an annual basis, bringing the industry together, giving the industry leaders and those stakeholders an opportunity to talk about the issues, to kind of start the year off on a great foot. We're very confident here at the National Biodiesel Board about the future of biodiesel, our theme, Fueling the Future. That is not only our theme of this conference, but that is our mission. So again, thank each and every one of you for being here. Got a couple of housekeeping items. I think we may have a winner of a gift card. But before I do that, there is an immense amount of work that goes into putting together a conference like this. And so I would like to have the staff and the team of the National Biodiesel Board stand up. And I'd like to have each of you all join me in thanking for them for all the fine work in putting this event together. And the winner of the $100 Amazon gift card is Todd Hinton from South Dakota Soybean. Todd, are you here? All right, there he is. So with that, we'll conclude, and I want each of you to be careful on your rides home, your drives home. We appreciate you being here. We will be in Fort Worth, Texas next year, and certainly look forward to you being there. If there's anything we can do at the National Biodiesel Board to make your lives easier in the biodiesel world and to help fuel the future of biodiesel, please reach out to us and let us know. Safe travels. Thank you all for being here.